Last game from the set from PrepTest 65. This one is a very long game with 7 questions, which I think is probably the max for any logic game. It's hard beyond the fact that there are a lot of questions. It's hard because, and we're seeing this more and more now with these logic games. You should also expect this to go on into future games. The LSAT writers are being innovative here, just slightly. Right? This game does kind of bottom out into a simple one-layer sequencing game, which we're all very, very familiar with. But of course, the entire difficulty here is getting this simple one-layer sequencing game board out of this mess that we're reading up here. And because I'm even asking the question of how you get from this mess into this world, it implies that it's not obvious, right? Which is a departure from all of our conventional games, which is incredibly obvious, right? That's why we train for games like this, because every single game we expect it to be just like every previous game, and that's true for games 1, 2, 3 in this set. That's entirely true. You didn't really have to think about it. You just read it and it's like, oh, I've done a game like this, 20 times before, right? And that's precisely this is what the LSAT writers are doing. This sort of unthinking kind of automatic response that we have, which is, by the way, entirely crucial, right? Don't think, oh, all your training has been for naught. No, that's incredibly important. This game is going to take something like, this game number 4 is going to take something like 13 minutes for you to do. How do you expect to have 13 minutes to do this game? Well, because you burn through games 1, 2, and 3 really quick, especially game 1, like super quick, right? That's how you shore up the time to have time to the luxury to even think about this game. So anyway, the writers are doing a thing here. They're employing something here to prevent this sort of unthinking automatic translation into our game board. And they're also employing a diversion strategy. By that I mean they're talking about some X item which we think is really important, which we're going to use to label our game board. And then as it turns out, after a certain point, after specifically rule number 2, they don't care about this anymore. They care about why. They care about the, I guess to talk in specifics of this game, first they tell us about the hours and the half hours and whatever. And then after rule number 2, they don't care about that anymore. They start caring about the first program, the second program, the third program, which may or may not correspond to the hours, right? The 2 o'clock program may actually turn out to be the third program. So that's that diversion strategy. Okay, having said all this, of course, it's with the benefit of hindsight. So naturally, the next question is, well, then how do I get hindsight while the clock is ticking? And there is a way to do that. And I got the strategy from talking to one of you guys about it. And we're talking about how you're adjusting to, these innovations that we're seeing in the 60s games. And, you should expect to see them moving forward. And the way you're adjusting is you just put your pencil down and you take a step back and you soak in the stimulus, you soak in the rules here, and you even take a look at the questions, all the while not actually writing anything down. And as it turns out, that's actually really good protection against the trap that the LSAT, that the writers are laying for you. Because, we talked about the diversions trick here. So if you just do nothing, at some point, the writers are gonna have to reveal their hand. They're gonna reveal to you, when they get into the questions, they have to, what they actually care about. So if you just wait until you get to see the questions before you decide what important elements to use for your game board, then there you go. Right? Then you've successfully sidestepped their trap. Now, to be fair, I have to say that this is a luxurious strategy because it presumes that you have something like 13 minutes to spend on this game, which, where are you going to get the 13 minutes from? It's from burning through games, I guess in this set, games 1, 2, and 3 real fast. But, in future games, whatever those easier games, those conventional games are, you have to burn through them really fast. Otherwise, you don't have the time to actually think about this game. Right? Okay, so anyway, having said all that, let's actually take a look at this game. We have a television programming director scheduling a 3-hour block of programs beginning at 1 p.m. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess, this is sequencing, right? Here's my 1 p.m. slot, here's my 2 p.m. slot, and here's my 3 p.m. slot. And what are we going to put in these slots? What are the programs? We learned there's an hour-long program called G. So I thought, okay, well, I guess maybe, G is 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. I don't know. And then we get these half-hour programs, R, S, T, and W. So that wait a second. This is like, this slot here represents 1 hour, right? That's what the slot means, and this slot represents 1 hour. So actually, I need to add half-hour slots, right? This is the 1:30 p.m. This is the thing that starts at 1:30. Right? This is the thing that starts at 2:30. This is the thing that starts at 3:30. Right? So now, but like to represent the G, instead of having just 1 here, I thought I was being all clever and stuff. Oh, I'll just write 2 Gs. Right, because that's what it does. The G takes up 2 half-hour slots, right? But as it turns out, and this is that diversion thing I'm talking about, this is not such a great way to do it. Neither is having the hours here, because later, as it turns out, when the writers, LSAT writers actually show their hand, they don't care about this. They actually care about which is the first program, which is the second program, right? But anyway, so we'll get to that later. So at this point, you're writing two G's over here to represent that wherever you place a G's, it's going to take up 2 slots. And then, of course, we have our R item, our S item, our T item, and our W item. And the remainder of the paragraph, the program is shown one after another exactly once. That's just our standard sequencing language to basically prevent this game from getting any weirder, right? Like nothing can stack up, basically. Okay, so let's take a look at our rules. Our very first rule tells us that G starts on the hour rather than the half hour. So see, this is a rule. Instead of writing my rule list, I thought to myself, well, I only really have 5 items, right? 1 item, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 items in a sequencing game. There aren't that many possibilities to begin with, and you're telling me for 1 item that it doesn't get to start here, here, nor here. So you're constraining 1 item to either this spot, or this spot. So I thought, oh, that's perfect for. I mean, there isn't a clear sign to split my game board up into 3 sub game boards immediately just to represent this, right? Just to represent this first rule. So that's exactly what I did. I split my game board up into 3 sub game boards to precisely to represent this rule. So here I'll put the G's over here like this, right? As one option. Here I'll put it over here starting at the second 2 p.m. slot on the hour. That's my second option. And for my last game board, G on the 3 p.m. slot to start on the hour. So there we have it, 3 sub game boards to represent rule number 1. Our second rule tells us that T starts on the half hour rather than the hour. So the half hour rather than the hour. So now this rule number 2, because we split the game board up into 3 sub game boards, let's try to see if we can localize rule number 2 into each of the 3 sub game boards. And we can. Rule number 2 for this sub game board, the half hour is this spot and this spot. Right, that's the half hour spot. So I just put a little T over here and I drew little lines to indicate, oh, T goes here or here. For this sub-game board, the half hour spots are this spot and this spot here. So this one's a little harder to do, but I just drew a little T and sort of had a line going from here and here. And this last game board, the half hour spots are this spot and this spot. So a little T over here and here. So that was it for rule number 2. And after this rule, nobody cares about this anymore. Right, then the game just kind of switches over. You get into the questions. They actually care about not whether it's 1 p.m. or 1:30 p.m., but rather whether this is the first program, the second program, right? See, and you see how that's confusing because here it kind of matches up. I guess 2 p.m. is the second program, but here it doesn't. In this game board, it does not, right? 2 p.m. is the first, second, third program, right? 2 p.m. is actually the third program. So that's incredibly confusing, and that's precisely the kind of the LSAT writers are hoping you do this, and then inertia just takes over, right? You've already done this. You're not going to change your game board. Well, why not? Change your game board. Don't do what they expect you to do, right? So, of course, that's we talked about that earlier in the beginning of this lesson about the general strategies. But here, I relabeled my game board. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, 4, 5, right? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's a 5-item sequencing game. That's all this game is, right? And here, what I did was I just thickened the lines, thickened the slots to connect the 2 slots, and I wrote a really big G, like sort of superimposed on this to remind myself this is actually just 1 item. It's not 2 items, right? So something like that. This is all really messy. I have to clean it up later on. But on your paper, you just want to like scratch all this stuff out, and just you have a lot of space, so just cleanly represent this. So actually, let me go ahead and do that here. So here it is all cleaned up. You'll notice we have the G's placed. That's the first program starting on 1 p.m. and 1:30. This is the third program on 2 p.m. 2:30. Fifth program on 3 p.m. and 3:30. And with our T's placed on, you see, like here, this is what they actually care about. It's not the half hours, right? All that served was to allow us to translate using the half hours into the fact that T gets to be the third or the fifth program in this sub game board, the second or the fifth in this one, the second or the fourth in this one, because this is what they ultimately care about in the questions. All right, so let's take a look at our 2 remaining rules, which I'll call rule number 1. We have R has to be before S. Okay, very standard sequencing rule. R before S, like this, and then our last rule, rule number 2, this one is a conditional rule. If W is before T, if W is shown earlier than T, then what happens? Then W is immediately before T, right? So if you think about this, what are our options between W and T? right? This is a sequencing game in that nothing can really stack. So we don't have too many options between W and T. Either W is before T, or alternatively T is before W. Right? That's it. That's the unspoken, right? The only two logical possibilities. And just telling us, okay, either this happens or this happens. Now they're saying, oh, instead of this happening, right? If this is what actually happens, just replace it with a WT box. So really, it's either T before W, right? Or alternatively, if it's not this, it's the WT box, right? So you can kind of amend this rule and just say it's either WT in a box or it's T before T is before W, and kind of just get rid of this part of the rule. So that's it for the rules, but before we get into the questions, I want to go over how these rules operate to get a good intuitive feel for these rules, because there aren't that many rules and there aren't that many options. So let's just start over here. T has two options, right? So what happens when T is here? Well, when T is here, the question you have to decide is about W, right? Is W before T? Well, if W is before T, then it's W before T like this, which is perfect, right? Because there's only a way for W to be before T. And then R, of course, has to be before S. So that's easy. Now, if W is after T, it has two options to be after T, right? W has two options to be after T. And you still have to accommodate the R before S, right? The R before S, which means, right, if W is taking up one of the follower spots, this leader R is relegated to this spot over here, right? S and W get to do a trade-off between 4 and 5. So that's what happens when W is after T. Now, what happens if T is, say, in this 5th spot over here? Well, then W has to be before T, because T is the final, you know, it's going to be after W. So W has to be here, R has to be here, S has to be here, right, to make the RS thing happen. So what I just laid out right there is essentially kind of what happens here and what happens here as well. So you just want to get a sense of that. If T goes over here, if W could be before, then R is before S. Right, okay, what if W is after? Well, W is after. W has an option between 4 and 5, right, to be after T. And you still have to accommodate R before S, which again, right, you see one of the follower spots taken up by W, so this leader R has to get relegated into this leader spot over here in 1. Right, so it's the same thing. W and S get to trade up in 4, 5, just like it did over here. Now, alternatively, if, say, T occupies the 5th spot in this sub-game board, then once again, you're forcing this to trigger. T is going to be after W because it's in spot number 5. So W has to be here, R has to be here, S has to be here. Again, just like what happened up here. And it's the same thing for this one as well, which I guess I'll save you the tedium, but it's the same thing. So on to the questions. First question, 17, standard acceptable situation question. You take your rules, eliminate. You'll notice that already it's a good thing that we use this game board here instead of the 130, 230 stuff because, right, you see, they don't care about that. They just treat G as one item, as the first item here, as the last item here, right, as the 4th item. That's no good, right? So we know G is either 1, 3, or 5. So here, 1, 5, 5, 5. So move on to your next rule, R before S, R before S, R before S. This one's no good. Next rule, if W is before T, it's WT in a box like this. WT box, WT box, WT not in a box. This one's gone. Of course, between A and B, it's got to be the T rule. But see, here now we have something to help us. G1, G5, right? G1, G5. When G isn't 1, T is either 3 or 5. Here has T4, no good. So B is right. Question 18 tells us something new. It tells us that W is our first program, so we're not looking at the subgame board here. We're looking at these two, so you want to quickly copy these over, put W into 1, and the question wants to know how many different orders are there in which the other programs could be shown, so just trigger your rules. If W is in 1, this one triggers. W is going to be before T, which means T gets called into place over here, T gets called into place over here, leaving 2 spots left for the RS rule to trigger. R has to be before S, R has to be before S, so I see 1 order, 2 orders. Question 19 is a could be true except question, so there are 4 answer choices that are could be trues, and it's telling us new premise that R is in 2, so we're going to go ahead and put R into 2. Into each of our subgame boards. Now, on paper, I actually didn't do that. You can, hopefully, I don't know. I mean, maybe you can, maybe you can't. If you can, just sort of see your mind that this subgame board doesn't work and this one doesn't work, then you'll just be a lot faster. If you can't, then you have to write it down and you'll just be a little bit slower. But you're gonna have to realize that this doesn't work. Otherwise, you're not getting the question right. And why doesn't this work? Well, because when R is in 2 over here, what it's doing is it's forcing T into place into 5, which then triggers this rule. T is going to be following everybody, so it's going to be following W, which means W has to be right in front of T, and then you're contradicting this rule. S is now before R, right? It's exactly the same thing over here. T gets forced into place, W gets called into place right before T, and S is now in contradiction of rule number 1. So neither of these game boards actually work, right? So we're actually just down to this game board. And when R is in 2, T has options. Either T could be here in 3, right? In which case, we're triggering this part of the rule. T is going to be before W, which has 2 options, right? Because WS, both as followers, just they get to switch. WS, SW, whatever, just has to follow R. W just has to follow T. Alternatively, T goes into spot number 5, at which point W gets called into place right before T, right, triggering this rule, and S, of course, following R like this. So this one has a couple options, right? This is one option over here. This is, I guess, 2 options over here. So now let's answer the could be true. S3, yep, I see it. S3 over here. S4, yep, I see it. Switch the S over. S could be in 4. T5, yep, T could be 5. W3 never happens, right? W is either 4 or 5, and W5 is okay. Question 20 is a must-be true question, and we're told a new premise that S is in 3, so we're not looking at this sub-game board here. So you quickly copy these 2 sub-game boards over, put S into 3, and then start making your inferences. So for this sub-game board, T is denied its 3rd spot, it gets forced into place into 5, which then calls upon this rule. W has to be immediately before T like this, and then R being the only remaining item leading S, and this is all okay. Down here, this one is a little harder to see. T is actually denied out of its 4th spot because if T were in 4, then W is supposed to be here, right? Triggering this rule, not S, right? So actually T can't be in 4, which means T must be in 2. Now R, being a leader of S, has only one option to go into 1 to lead S, which means W has to go into 4, satisfying this part of the rule. So there we go. Those are our 2 sub-game boards, and this is a must-be true. You look for the constant, and W4 is our constant, which is answer choice E. Question 21 is a could-be true question, and it tells us a new premise that G is in 3, so that's great. We're not looking at this one. We're not looking at this one. With G being in 3, what could be true? Well, I guess a lot of things, so I think we have to just kind of brute force our way through. A says R2. Could R be in the second program? Well, if R is here, then T gets forced into place into 5, then that calls upon W to be immediately before it, and then we have a contradiction with SR. We've seen this before, right? So I don't know if you actually have to jot this down. Maybe just in your mind you can do that. And again, whether you can or not, that just determines how quickly you're able to move through this question. B says R5. This one should be fairly quick. R's a leader. You cannot put it in the last spot. S4, I don't know, maybe S in 4. And see here, again, we made that inference. We made this inference before. You don't want to put T here, because if T is here, that dictates W to be immediately before it, right? So that's no good. So you want to put T over here, and then you want to realize, oh, R leading S, R only has one option to lead S, and then, of course, W takes up the last spot, and this is a check. R is before S, and this part of the rule is a check. T is before W. So C works. So you choose it, you move on. Question 22 is a cannot be true question. So in other words, it's a must be false, which means there are 4 answer choices that could be true. I've actually already translated the answer choices into just kind of what they visually look like. So let's just go through each answer choice. Can S be before G? I mean, I sort of just recall seeing that before. Sure, why not, right? S before G over here, you put an R before the S, you put the WT like this, and you're all set. So A is a could be true answer choice. B says W before R, immediately before R. Now, see, this one you have to amend your rule. You're basically saying this is not happening, right? You're saying that's not happening because W is immediately before R. So T is now before W, which is immediately before R in a box. And what about the R? Well, the R has to lead the S. So now this whole box has to lead the S. So really, for the remaining 4 items, we're saying, oh, this is the order. T goes first, then this, then this, then this. Now, can you place this anywhere? Right, we have 3 sub-game boards. Where can you place this? Obviously not here. There's no place for the box here, right? What? The box goes here, and where's S going to go, right? The box goes here, where's T going to go, right? So no way. Now, over for this sub-game board and this sub-game board, notice that T is our supreme leader. T leads the entire chain, right? But here, T's constrained, right? T's supposed to go here, according to this rule, right? But this rule is forcing T not to go there. And here, T is supposed to go here according to this rule, but this rule is forcing T not to go here. So that's a contradiction, right? So that's why this is a must be false. And finally, we get to our last question, 23, and it's our substitution equivalence question. As if this game wasn't hard enough already, we get hit with this really hard question. But, I actually think it's a good thing that this was placed at the very end, because imagine, you probably didn't even have time to get to this question anyway, right? So what's the harm, right? Imagine if they place this question in the middle of this game, or even if they move this game up one game ahead to like game 3 or something, right? That would have been way worse, So I don't know if it's too much to assume mercy on part of the LSAT writers. Maybe they just miscalculated or something. But anyway, so how do we do substitution equivalence questions? Well, they're targeting this rule here that G has to start on the hour, which translated means G is the first, third, or fifth program. They're targeting this rule. They're saying get rid of this rule, right? You get rid of this rule and you replace it with one of these rules here, the correct answer choice rule, and we're going to end up with exactly the same set of worlds, right? So that's the theory behind what they're asking us to do. So this question is actually, as far as substitution equivalence questions go, this one is not that bad, right? C is the right answer choice. G not second or nor fourth. Well, because if you think about it, what does that mean for G not to be the second nor fourth program, right? Not the second nor fourth program. It just means G has to be the first, third, or fifth program, right? It could be the first, third, or fifth program, and as it turns out, that's just exactly what our original rule says. So this one isn't so hard to see. If you just kind of gloss over all your answer choices, maybe this one will sort of just jump out at you, and with the time pressure and whatever, you might just be like, okay, it's C, I don't have time, I'm done. Right, so you would have sort of lucked out. But anyway, so how do you really go about checking each answer choice? Well, we talk about this. I'm probably gonna have to talk about this every time we get a substitution equivalence. But you can't knock out these answer choices. Cannot knock out. They cannot sneak in. What does that mean? That means old worlds that were allowed, right? Worlds that were allowed under our old set of rules cannot be knocked out by the new rule. And old worlds that were not allowed under our old set of worlds cannot be snuck in by the new rule. Right, so let's take a look at each of the answers in turn. A sneaks in a new world. A just stipulates that G cannot be in front of T. Right, that's not much of a stipulation at all. G cannot be in front of T. Okay, I can just, let's put G in 2. See, I'm sneaking in a world. G2 was not allowed in our old worlds, right? But in our new world, it is allowed. I put G into 2. Toss T over here into 5. W right here. Take care of this rule. R over here. S over here. Look, this is fine, right? According to our new set of rules, this is an okay world. According to our old set of rules, this is not an okay world, so we're sneaking in a new world, right? So that's why answer choice A is incorrect. Maybe it's knocking out a world, I don't know, but of course you could make both mistakes at the same time. B says G is first or fifth. What that knocks out, that just immediately knocks out G3, right? This new rule stipulates that G must be either first or fifth, meaning you can't be in 3. Very clear knockout of an old world that was allowed, so incorrect. D says G is third, R is first, so this is also a knockout, right? This also knocks out an old world that was allowed. When, back here when G was third, R didn't have to be first. We could have had R being in 4, right? Leading S like this, check, W over here, T, check. So this world was allowed in our old set of worlds, but according to this new rule, this world is not allowed, right? Because you see, when G is third, R is supposed to be first, according to this rule. So this one, this answer choice D is knocking out a world that was allowed, so wrong. And finally, E is also a knockout. When G is not first, T has to be before G. That's just, when G is not first, so basically when G is here or here, T has to be before G. Really, it doesn't, right? G could be in 3, T could be here, W could be here, R could be here, S could be here. This is totally okay in our old set of rules, but this is not okay in our new set of rules, right? So it's knocking out an old acceptable world. Hi there, I hope you found this video helpful. You can help us out in return by giving us a thumbs up.